What is up, everybody? My name is Nate, and I am so excited to welcome you to the second episode of the Chokehold Hour, my new podcast where I will be discussing anything and everything combat sports related. This week, we're going to be talking about UFC 287, Adesanya vs. Pereira, what's going to go down in this card, and what's to come after. So let's get right into it. So, guys, this is an absolutely stacked card. You have Kevin Gastelum and Chris Curtis fighting on the prelims. Just to get this out of the way at the start of the podcast, I am beyond excited for this card. This honestly might be the most stacked card of the year, the most stacked card we've seen in a while, and we are really just in for a treat with UFC 287. But we're going to go over this whole card, and we're going to start at the bottom. So we're going to start with the main prelim in Chris Curtis and Kevin Gastelum. So, guys, this fight's really interesting. Kevin Gastelum, he's a bigger name than Chris Curtis. He's done his time in the UFC. He's earned his respect. He put on a 5-round war with Izzy for the interim belt. Kevin Gastelum, he's done a lot of good things in his career, but when he's faced higher level guys recently, especially like his fight against Robert Whittaker, he hasn't looked like his old self. I think his problem is his size. Kelvin is not really big enough to be a middleweight, but he also doesn't fit in the welterweight mix that well either. So I don't think he's ever really found his true home in the UFC. Whereas a guy like Chris Curtis, he's big. I don't know how he would fare at middleweight, but at welterweight, Chris Curtis is big. He carries heavy knockout power. We saw that against Phil Hawes. He knocked out Brendan Allen. Chris Curtis has that power, and Kelvin Gastelum's getting older. It's getting harder for him to cut weight. He's got to do a lot more to even enter the cage at this point in his career. And Chris Curtis, while he's 35, he didn't enter the UFC till a later age. I think he's still in his fighting prime, and I think he's going to catch Kelvin at some point, and I don't think it's going to be good. So, yeah, I've got Chris Curtis by TKO, so that's my pick. Lock it in, and let's get to the main card, guys. So starting at the bottom of the main card, we have Raul Rosas Jr., the teenage prodigy who has taken over the MMA world since his UFC debut. He will be fighting Christian Rodriguez, guys. Christian Rodriguez, he's not as big of a name, so I think he's really just on this main card as Raul Rosas Jr.'s opponent. There's not much else to it. I think Rosas Jr. is a prospect that the UFC really likes. They're going to want to push him to the top of the division. I mean, he's already talking about guys like Aljo and how he's the only one who can beat Aljo in the division. I mean, this guy obviously has big ambitions. He's got the mouth to draw in the fans, and he's got the fighting ability to back up his trash talk. So I really think they're just trying to fast track him to the top while not pushing him too hard, because remember, he's young. They don't want to allow him to get hit too many times at an early stage in his career. But I do think Raul Rosas Jr. takes this one pretty easily by first round submission. So that's my pick. We're going to lock that one in. Raul Rosas Jr., round 1 submission. I don't really see it going any other way, guys. So let's move on to this next fight. Guys, these next 2 fights actually are the 2 fights I may be most excited for on this card. These 2 fights they're going to be fight of the year potential fights. These are going to be absolute bangers, guys. So let's start with Kevin Holland versus the veteran Santiago Ponzinibbio. Oh my God, guys, this is an incredible fight. We have 2 guys that just like to go at it. Look at Ponzinibbio's last fight. He was fighting Alex Moreno, and Alex Moreno, actually, I was correct, but he was fighting Alex Moreno, and he was down 2-0. He was down 29-27, undoubtedly. He was losing that fight. Alex looked like the better, more complete fighter, and Ponzinibbio, he looked like his age was catching up to him a little bit. Now, third round, Ponzinibbio caught him. Ponzinibbio is never out of a fight, guys. He's truly a warrior. No matter how old he gets, his chin doesn't seem to wear. He shows he can take shots. I mean, now, can you catch him? Yes, the Leech did it. The Leech showed when Ponzinibbio returned to the UFC. The Leech caught him and put him to sleep. So it's possible, yes. But Ponzinibbio is a tough fighter, and I think because Kevin Holland, who is also an incredible striker. I mean, Kevin Holland's one of the most entertaining guys in the UFC, hands down. He talks during all his fights. He's got great hands, great boxing. His wrestling isn't horrible. I think he definitely has leaps and bounds where he has leaps and bounds to improve, but his wrestling's not horrible. I really think Kevin Holland, he's a heavy boxing style. He loves that 1-2. He's got long arms. He's really good at using his reach. And I think Holland and Ponzinibbio is just going to, stylistically, it creates a great fight. I think it's going to end up being an all-out brawl. They're going to go to war for 3 rounds. Someone may get finished in the 3rd round, but I really think this is going to be one of those wars, split decision type of 3-round fights. I think it's going to be awesome. And next, the other fight that I am so beyond excited for, Rob Font versus the up-and-coming Adrian Yanez. Guys, this fight's unbelievable. Rob Font he's a seasoned vet in the UFC. He's done his time. He's fought a lot of good guys. I mean, he dominated Cody Garbrandt to a 5-round decision. Guys, Rob Font, he looked great against Chito Vera, in my opinion. I know he got caught a lot, but if you look at the fight stats, Rob Font actually landed a lot more strikes than Chito Vera. Chito Vera, he's got that it factor. When he touches you, it hurts. And Rob Font just he didn't have the defense of Corey Sandhagen and the striking ability to not get caught for 5 rounds. He just ended up getting caught at one point in each round, and he got hurt significantly every time he got caught, so he ended up losing that fight. But if you look at the numbers, Rob Font fought really well. He was landing a good amount of jabs, 1-2s, stringing his boxing combos together well, landing some elbows in the mix as well. I mean, he was fighting a good fight, and I think Rob Font, we definitely can't take him lightly. He's a good forward pressure fighter. He has a great jab, one of the best jabs in the UFC, and I think he's gonna give Yanez some problems. But guys, Adrian Yanez, I know everyone's already said this, but he really does remind me of a young Jorge Masvidal. His boxing is just incredible. Adrian Yanez everything he does is just so crisp. His strikes, there's no wasted energy or motion in his shots. When Yanez is punching, it's one punch to another. Everything is a flow state. He never is at a standstill. He's always ready to strike. Yanez is one of the most crisp boxers that I have witnessed in recent memory, in the UFC especially. I mean, he's such a boxing specialist in a sport where mixed martial arts is the theme, and it's about mixing up your talents and abilities. Adrian Yanez is one of those cases where he is a specialist, and it just doesn't matter. He's so good at what he does that his special ability can take him to the top. So I think there's two ways this fight goes, guys. I think we're either going to have the coming out party of Adrian Yanez, where he establishes himself as a top contender and establishes himself as on his way to taking over the division, where he just really brutalizes Font and shows Font that, yeah, my boxing's on another level. You were never going to hang with me. This is just how this fight's going to go. And Yanez is going to piece him up. Or I do think we can't sleep on Rob Font. Rob Font is a good fighter, guys, with a good jab. He's got some wrestling. I think there's a chance that Rob Font teaches Adrian a lesson. I think Adrian Yanez is confident in his skill. He's a little cocky, but I'd say he's more confident. But he's never fought a guy at Rob Font's level. So as long as Yanez's boxing translates to the top of the division and he's able to defend takedowns and maintain his cardio, I really do think it's going to be his coming out party. But if his boxing is not as good as we thought, and that is highlighted in this fight against a guy like Rob Font, who's a seasoned veteran, top contender, I think there's a chance Rob Font can really just jab him to death for 3 rounds, land some takedowns, out-cardio him, and just outwork him and teach him or show him that, yeah, the top of the division, there are guys that beat me, but we're all pretty good. Everyone at the top of the bantamweight division is a skilled fighter, and I think either Adrian Yanez learns that or he enters that discussion of the newer skilled fighters that are taking over the bantamweight division. So, all right, guys, now we're gonna move on. We're gonna move on to the co-main event, guys. I mean, this fight is Jorge Masvidal, Gilbert Burns, Miami. The stakes, they've never been higher. Jorge Masvidal, 305, his hometown, Miami. I mean, if you've been watching UFC Embedded, Miami really, Jorge Masvidal embodies Miami. He represents Miami in the UFC. This is his hometown where he grew up. This is where he grew up fighting. This is Jorge Masvidal's home. And I think that could play an advantage to him? Maybe, but either way, it really develops the storyline of this fight. Now, this fight's interesting because I personally think Gilbert Burns is on another level as a martial artist compared to Jorge Masvidal. I think Gilbert Burns is just good at everything. He doesn't really have any weaknesses that stand out significantly in his game. I think his striking is good. We saw him strike with Usman and hurt Usman. Jorge Masvidal, when he fought Kamaru, I didn't see Kamaru feel any sort of threat throughout the entirety of the fight. It just seemed too one-sided. It seemed like there was a huge skill gap between Kamaru Usman and Jorge Masvidal. Whereas when I watched Gilbert Burns fight Kamaru Usman, I was like, okay, these two are supposed to be in there. Gilbert Burns, he earned this title shot. This is supposed to be happening, this fight. So I do think Gilbert Burns is on another level as a martial artist compared to Jorge. But the one thing I will say is Jorge has that it factor. He has proven that when he catches you, and he's got the crowd on his side, the momentum on his side, he can put you to sleep. I mean, look, Jorge Masvidal, his legendary MMA year-long run was one of the greatest runs in MMA, if not the greatest run in MMA ever. Knocking out Darren Till, knocking out Ben Askren, and Nate Diaz all in 1 year. He did it to Darren Till in London, and then he did it to Nate Diaz for the BMF belt. I mean, Jorge Masvidal is not afraid of the big stage, and in his recent fights, he's shown he's struggled with the wrestling, which is why I'm giving Gilbert the edge in this fight. But he also, it went a little brushed under the rug because Colby dominated him for 5 rounds. But Jorge hurt Colby in that fight. Colby, if you look at the still image of when Jorge landed that one nice right hook that dropped Colby's face, his skin was flying off of his face. That shot, the momentum that shot and the strength that shot hit him with, that was no joke. Colby Covington, he was really dazed when that strike hit him. So I still think Masvidal carries that knockout power with him. I just don't think his technicality is where it was, and it's harder for him to land strikes now. That's why I think he's been struggling a lot. So what do I think is going to happen? I do think Gilbert Burns is just going to take him down and really dominate him, ragdoll him. I think Gilbert Burns, I think, is going to show that he's just on another level as Jorge in this fight. I think Gilbert Burns is going to submit him in the first round. Now, that being said, if Jorge Masvidal has really been dedicating himself to training, he has been doing nothing else outside of MMA, working on his striking, landing those knockout blows, I think he still carries that power, so I think there is a chance that Jorge Masvidal can knock out Gilbert Burns, especially Kamaru knocked out Gilbert with a jab. Gilbert's chin, he can take a shot for sure. We saw that in the Hamzat fight, but he is not invincible. So do I think Gilbert's going to ragdoll him? Yes. Gilbert Burns, submission, round 1 possibly even. I think this fight's going to look like Gilbert versus Neil Magny all over again. But do I think there's a chance that would I be surprised if Jorge lands a sneaky knockout out of nowhere? Absolutely not. I would not be surprised at all. But that being said, Gilbert Burns, round 1 submission, lock it in. All right, guys, now we're going to move on to the main event, guys. The fight that this card was built on. The fight that means more than any other fight possibly in the Ultimate Fighting Championship at this current moment. Alex Pereira versus Israel Adesanya 4. My goodness, guys, when do we see a 4th fight where one guy has already won 3 times? This never happens. This fight is quite literally history, guys. When you look at Brandon Moreno versus Davison Figueiredo. Those guys fought 4 times. That's because they were going back and forth. They had a draw. Both of them won a fight. It was a close trilogy. Now, this trilogy, which is soon to not be a trilogy, it hasn't been that close. 3 fights, Pereira's won all of them. Now, yes, the first fight in kickboxing was a controversial decision. The next 2 fights, Izzy got knocked out. Izzy got knocked out cold in kickboxing, and Izzy got TKO'd in the UFC, where he was stunned. I mean, listen, it's so hard to say what's going to happen in this fight, because Israel Adesanya, he really is an incredible, I think he's the best mixed martial artist in the UFC. Overall, if you take one guy who has every skill, it's Izzy. I mean, look at the guys he's faced. He's faced top-level wrestlers like Marvin Vettori, Robert Whittaker. These guys are good wrestlers. It didn't matter. They couldn't take Izzy down. The only guy that could take Izzy down was Jan Blachowicz, but that's because the size difference was just too much when Izzy tried to move up to 205 and get that light heavyweight strap. I think Izzy really is a complete mixed martial artist, and he's a much better mixed martial artist than Pereira. But that being said, Pereira has that it factor, guys. I've talked about it with Jorge. I mean, it's just that thing that a fighter has where they can knock anyone out at any given time in a fight. I mean, Pereira, he is. First of all, it's the size. The size is really what scares me. Izzy is a better fighter than Poatan, no doubt. I think Israel Adesanya is the best mixed martial artist, like I've said, in the UFC. But Poatan has that power and he has that size. Man, I think Pereira could really fight at heavyweight if he wanted to. Like, his walk-around weight, it's 225, I'd have to guess, 220. I mean, have you guys seen the picture of him standing next to Dominic Reyes? A light heavyweight. Dominic Reyes is a light heavyweight. Poatan looked so much bigger than him. It's unbelievable the size that this guy carries and walks around with. I mean, I'm honestly just astonished that he's able to make the 185-pound division and cut that weight. I mean, props to him. He's obviously dedicated. He's training. So, yeah, it's really awesome that he's able to do that. But I do think he's a little bit of a weight bully. And I think that weight's going to play a factor into this fight. So, guys, I think there's a few ways this fight could go down. I think, one, it could go the same exact way as the last fight. I think Izzy is the better mixed martial artist. That's going to show in this fight, regardless of what's going to happen. Izzy's going to land some shots, land some leg kicks. He's going to manage distance, maintain distance well, and show that he is the better mixed martial artist. But, unfortunately, Pereira has not lost any of his size, his power, or skill. And that size, power, and skill is going to show in this fight. I think there's a possibility Poatan knocks him out in the fifth again. I really think that could happen because Izzy is going to be the better martial artist. He's going to outpoint him for 4 rounds. But Poatan, you cannot give Poatan 5 rounds with that power to knock you. You cannot give him 5 rounds of chances to knock you out because he will capitalize. This is why I think there is a chance this fight could just be a repeat of their first bout in the UFC. Now, that being said, Israel Adesanya hurt Pereira bad at the end of the first round. I think a lot of people are forgetting who Israel Adesanya is. A lot of people are forgetting that this man was the champion, not just the champion. He was on his way to middleweight GOAT status. People were talking about this guy surpassing Anderson Silva. I mean, Israel Adesanya lapped the division before Pereira. There is nobody else in this division that he can fight. There is nothing next for him. He is still the best middleweight in the world, other than possibly Alex Pereira. So, I think Izzy might remind everyone in this fight that he is Israel Adesanya. He is the last style bender. I think that if Izzy can hurt Pereira again like he did in that last fight and capitalize on it, I think he can finish Pereira early. I think Izzy's best path to victory is tagging Pereira early and catching him off guard and not giving him any recovery time because Pereira holds all that. He's so big. He has so much mass and size. He recovers so quickly because he's much bigger than Izzy. The shots aren't impacting him that much for a long-lasting period of time. Now, if Izzy can clip him once, nice on the chin, and have him wobbled like he did in that first fight, close in on him, throw enough strikes where the ref can pull him off and get a TKO, just like Alex did in the 5th round of their first fight in the UFC, I think Izzy can win this fight by early stoppage. I really do. I think this fight is either going to be Israel Adesanya by TKO under 3.5 rounds. I think he'll have to do it. Probably under 3. I think he'll have to do it in the first or the second round if he really wants to win this fight. Or I think it's going to go the same way as it did with Pereira coming back after getting outpointed with a 5th round knockout. Because like I said, you cannot give a guy like Poatan with that power 5 rounds and 25 minutes of chances to knock you out. So guys, it is going to go one of 2 ways. We are either going to see an early Israel Adesanya finish or a buzzer beater Alex Poatan Pereira finish like we did last time. It is going to be one or the other. No decision, no in between. Lock it in. All right, guys. So with that brings a wrap to our UFC 287 recap. Guys, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. It was really an honor to do this video. I mean, I'm beyond excited for this card. Once again, I want to highlight how blessed we are as MMA fans to be able to watch so many high-level mixed martial artists compete in one night at one venue on one card. And if you're going to this card in person, man, I'm so jealous of you. And this is going to be an absolutely incredible card. Now, guys, remember, you are watching The Chokehold Hour with me, Nate. Don't forget to go follow my TikTok at The Chokehold Hour. Follow me on YouTube as well, guys, The Chokehold Hour. And that's really all I've got for you guys today. So thank you so much for tuning in to the second episode of The Chokehold Hour. I'm really excited for what's to come. Stay tuned for my post-fight video. I'm going to be talking about UFC 287 and how things go down after the fights conspire. And I'm going to be telling you guys how you should have bet exactly what I said to do because I know what I'm talking about, guys. I know the UFC pretty well. So, yeah, I'm really excited to make that video, and I'm excited for you guys to watch and just excited for the future and what's to come. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. That is your Chokehold Hour, and I will see you next time out.